Welcome to Fear Spiral, your portal to the darkest, most chilling true horror stories from the edges of reality. Every week we dive into encounters that will make your skin crawl. Tales of shadows on deserted highways, mysterious figures in the fog, and whispers that follow you home. From vanishing trucks and impossible mile markers to rest stops that disappear into the night, we bring you stories told by people who face the unimaginable and live to tell it. Hit subscribe if you dare, and remember, out here, in the dead of night, fear is real, and it's watching. Are you ready to spiral into fear? You think highways are just roads and rest stops are safe. You think driving alone at night is normal. But out here, in the fog, in the dark stretches of Appalachian backroads, things move differently. Shadows appear where they shouldn't. Figures follow when no one is there. Rest stops vanish, and mile markers, they move. These are not stories to scare children. They are accounts from people who live to tell what shouldn't be possible. This is real fear. This is what happens when the night watches you, when the road itself seems alive. Tonight, I'll take you through 12 encounters that drivers, truckers, and travelers couldn't explain. Encounters that will make you question what waits in the dark when you think you're alone. Welcome to the edge of fear. These are the true stories that haunt the night. The trucker who vanished. I've been driving freight trucks across the Appalachian routes for over 7 years. Most nights are long, quiet, uneventful stretches of road, with the only company being my CB radio and the hum of the engine. But last October, something happened that still burned into my mind. It was around 2:30 a.m. on a fog-heavy stretch of Route 219 in West Virginia. The mountains loomed darkly on either side, and the only light came from my headlights cutting through the mist. The autumn air was chilly, and I remember gripping the wheel tighter than usual, feeling the damp cold seep through my gloves. I'd just passed a rest stop when a flicker of movement caught my eye in the fog. A figure on the side of the road, an older man, waving frantically. I slowed down, rolling my window halfway. "Hey, you need a ride?" I called, trying to sound casual. But the fog made him look off. His movements were jerky, almost robotic. He didn't answer immediately, just stared at me. Then, as I pressed the horn lightly, he suddenly sprinted into the trees on the shoulder, disappearing almost instantly. I shook it off as a local trying to hitch a ride in the middle of nowhere. People do stupid things out here, but something in my gut didn't like it. 15 miles later, I noticed a set of headlights following me, distant but persistent. Normally, I wouldn't think much of it. Trucks are everywhere, but these lights, they seemed to mirror my every turn, never overtaking or passing. I checked my mirrors constantly, feeling sweat prick my neck despite the cold. The fog was thickening now, muffling the engine sound and making the highway feel unnervingly isolated. Every time I glanced at the side roads, I thought I saw glimpses of that same man from earlier, vanishing when I tried to focus. Around 3:15 a.m., I decided to pull into a small diner near the next exit to shake off the feeling. I parked under a flickering streetlight, the neon buzzing above the door. As I stepped out, my boots crunching on gravel, I felt the hairs on my arms rise. From inside the diner, I saw movement at the far end. Another man, tall and hunched, staring at me from the window. I froze, heart pounding. He didn't move as I approached the door. I slid it open, the bell above chiming, but when I looked back outside, the figure was gone. I thought I was imagining things. I grabbed a coffee, sitting in a corner booth, trying to convince myself I was just tired. My CB crackled suddenly, a distorted voice whispering, "Don't stop. Keep driving." I slammed the handset down, my hands shaking. No one else was on the channel, and the voice didn't sound like anyone I'd ever heard before. I debated leaving, knowing that if I stayed too long, the night could get weirder. Eventually, I returned to my truck, checked the mirrors again, and noticed my headlights were flickering in sync with my own heartbeats. Or at least that's how it felt, the moment I pulled onto the highway again. The headlights reappeared, closer this time. I tried radio chatter, hoping someone would respond, but only static answered. Then, as I navigated a sharp bend, the fog cleared briefly, and I saw him, the old man, standing in the middle of the lane, just staring. I slammed on the brakes, my truck screeching as the tires skidded over the asphalt. Heart hammering, I swerved into the shoulder, glancing back. He was gone. No sound of footsteps, nothing. The silence that followed was suffocating. I called my dispatcher over the CB, trying to sound normal. "Hey, you got any rigs behind me?" She laughed. "Not for another hour. You're alone out there." My stomach dropped. Alone, except for whatever had been following me. I couldn't bring myself to drive faster, but I had to keep moving. I switched on every light, honking occasionally, but nothing else appeared. The rest of the drive was uneventful, yet every shadow in the trees seemed alive. I didn't stop again until sunrise. When the mountains looked ordinary again, the fog dissipated, and the highway seemed just like any other morning route. Weeks later, I heard a story on a local radio station about a trucker who had gone missing on the same stretch of Route 219 last seen in the middle of the night, under thick fog. Nothing else was found. I don't know if it was him or someone else, but ever since that night, I swear sometimes I see a figure in the rearview mirror, standing at the edge of the fog, watching me. And when the headlights flicker just right, I could swear it's the same old man, waiting for the next trucker who dares drive alone through the mountains. I still drive these routes, because it's my job. But I never stop, never slow down, and I never, ever pick anyone up after dark. The hollow that followed me. I've been a freight driver for about 6 years now, mostly running overnight hauls through the Appalachians. Usually, it's just me, the hum of the engine, and the occasional flicker of headlights in the distance. But one night, last November, I drove down a stretch of Route 33 near the West Virginia border that I'll never forget. The sun had been gone for hours, and the dense forest on either side of the road had swallowed every trace of light. The temperature had dropped sharply, a damp chill crawling into my truck cab. I remember glancing at the clock. 2:47 a.m. It started off ordinary enough. I was hauling a load of auto parts from Charleston to Roanoke, and traffic was non-existent. The highway was straight, quiet, and lined with dense trees that occasionally shivered with the wind. I'd been listening to a podcast to keep awake, but I noticed that with each mile, the forest seemed to grow darker. There was a low fog rolling in from the hollows, settling over the asphalt, thick enough that my headlights barely cut through it. I pulled the visor down and rubbed my eyes. Maybe I was just tired. Around 3:05 a.m., I noticed movement at the edge of the fog on the right-hand side. A dark shape crouched low to the ground. I slowed slightly, squinting through the mist. The shape was gone when I blinked, but then I thought I saw it again closer this time, now standing upright, motionless, almost blending with the trees. My heart rate spiked. "Probably a deer," I muttered aloud, but the way it didn't move made me doubt that. I gripped the wheel tighter, trying to shake off the feeling. The next 10 miles were tense. Every time I glanced at the roadside, shadows seemed to stretch toward me. Occasionally, I thought I heard something brushing against the gravel, soft thuds like footsteps. I checked the mirrors. Nothing. The radio only carried static, broken by what I thought were whispers, but when I fiddled with the knobs, it went dead. The fog thickened so much that I had to slow to 40 miles per hour. My chest ached from the tension, sweat prickling even though the air was freezing cold. Around 3:32 a.m., I saw a small wooden sign for an abandoned gas station, one of those places locals always say is haunted. Curiosity mixed with unease, I pulled in. The gravel crunched beneath the tires as I parked. The building was a shell, broken windows, a faded gas sign swaying in the wind, doors hanging open. The air smelled of damp wood, rust, and a faint chemical stench, like old gasoline mixed with rot. I grabbed my flashlight from the cab and stepped out. The hollow around the station was unnaturally silent. No crickets, no wind in the trees, just the faint hum of my idling engine. I shone the flashlight into the building. Inside, there were shelves overturned, cans and bottles strewn across the floor. But what made my stomach twist was the faint footprints in the dirt and gravel barefoot, small, leading from the doorway into the woods behind the station. I felt a wave of dread. I'd heard stories from older drivers about this place, a hollow where people vanished, their last footprints leading into the forest, never to be seen again. I debated leaving immediately, but something compelled me to check the back. I followed the footprints into the fog-drenched trees. The air was colder here, almost painfully so. My flashlight barely penetrated the mist. Every snapped twig and rustling leaf made me flinch. Then I heard it, breathing. Slow, deliberate, coming from the fog ahead. I froze. "Hello?" I called softly. Nothing but silence. My heartbeat felt deafening in my ears. Then the breathing changed, became uneven, heavier, closer. I swung the flashlight wildly, and for a brief moment, I saw a figure, tall, thin, hunched slightly, with long, pale arms hanging almost to the knees. Its head was tilted strangely, like it was studying me. My stomach dropped. I wanted to scream, but my voice caught. Before I could react further, the figure vanished into the fog. My instinct screamed at me to run back to the truck, and I obeyed. Tripping over roots and rocks, flashlight bouncing as I sprinted. When I finally reached the cab, I slammed the door and locked it, shaking, heart hammering. I looked back through the rear window. The fog seemed to shift unnaturally. And then I saw movement, more figures, maybe 3 or 4, stepping silently out of the mist. They didn't run. They didn't shout. They just walked slowly toward the edge of the truck's light. I floored the gas pedal without hesitation, tires squealing against the gravel, fog whirling around me as I tore back onto the highway. I drove in silence for the next hour, not daring to glance at the mirrors or roadside. The fog began to thin as I approached a small town, and the streetlights made the road look ordinary again. I tried to rationalize what had happened. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe hallucinations. But the footprints in the gas station dirt, the breath I heard in the hollow, and the fleeting figure, those felt real. Weeks later, I found out from another trucker that the hollow behind the abandoned station had a reputation. Several drivers had reported hearing footsteps, strange whispers, and glimpsing pale figures in the fog, only to find nothing when they investigated. One man had vanished completely. His truck was found abandoned on the road with the engine still running. That story hit me hard. I realized I had come closer than I wanted to admit since that night. I never stop at that stretch after dark. Even when passing during daylight, I feel the memory of the hollow, the eerie quiet, the sense of being watched. And every now and then, when I drive alone through other stretches of Appalachian fog, I swear I see figures at the edge of the trees, just standing and staring, as if waiting for me to slow down, waiting for me to follow them into the mist. The scariest part? I don't know if it's over. Sometimes when I drive through thick fog on other routes, I hear it, the slow, deliberate breathing, just beyond the reach of my headlights. And I feel that same icy grip of dread, that same pull to step off the road and into the hollow. I don't stop anymore. I don't slow down. But deep down, I know that some night, that hollow, or whatever is in it, will find me again. The rest stop that wasn't there. I've been driving long-haul freight for nearly a decade, mostly through the Appalachian Mountains. Night shifts are usually lonely but uneventful. And I've learned to find comfort in routine. A full tank, coffee in a thermos, and keeping the CB radio close. But one night in late September, around 1:48 a.m., I had an experience I still can't explain. I was hauling a refrigerated load from Knoxville to Pittsburgh. The road was mostly empty Route 50, deep in West Virginia, cutting through miles of forested mountains. The moon was hidden behind clouds, leaving the highway almost pitch black except for my headlights. The air smelled damp and earthy, the way it does after a light autumn drizzle. I was tired, sure, but nothing out of the ordinary. Until I noticed a small, dimly lit rest stop up ahead. I didn't remember seeing it on maps before, but exhaustion can mess with perception, so I figured I'd take a break. As I turned off the highway onto the gravel entrance, the air grew colder, almost biting. The fog seemed thicker here, clinging to the truck cab and muffling all sound except the crunch of gravel under my tires. The rest stop was small, with a single building illuminated by a flickering yellow light. I parked and stepped out, shivering, pulling my jacket tighter around me. A faint smell of gasoline and mildew hung in the air. I fumbled for my flashlight and walked toward the building. The closer I got, the stranger it felt. The rest stop seemed wrong. The doors were closed, but the windows were dark, almost black. No vending machines, no signs, nothing indicating it had ever been used. I knocked lightly on the door, and the echo of the hollow building made me jump. "Hello, anyone here?" I asked. No answer. The air felt heavy, almost pressing against me. A low wind stirred the dead leaves around my feet. Then I heard its footsteps. Soft, deliberate, approaching from the parking lot behind me. I spun around, shining my flashlight, but the gravel was empty. My heart started pounding. "Must be an animal," I muttered, though the steps sounded too measured, too human. I turned back to the building and noticed something that froze my blood. The front door now had handprints, small and smudged, streaked across the glass as if someone had just pressed against it from the inside. I swear I hadn't seen them before. I took a cautious step back. My truck sat in the distance, headlights faintly cutting through the fog. I debated leaving immediately, but curiosity, or maybe fear, kept me there. I walked around the building, checking for other exits or signs of life. That's when I noticed them, footprints leading into the forest behind the stop. They were small, barefoot, deeply pressed into the wet soil. My stomach twisted. They were fresh. I was about to head back to the truck when I heard a whisper, almost at my ear. "Don't leave." I froze. The voice was female, soft but urgent, almost desperate. My mind screamed that it wasn't real, that exhaustion was playing tricks, but the cold on the back of my neck told me otherwise. I bolted to the truck, fumbling with the keys, throwing myself inside, locking the doors. The whispering didn't follow immediately, but I could feel it, the presence. Watching, waiting. I started the engine and slowly backed onto the highway. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then my headlights caught movement in the fog, a figure standing just beyond the tree line, looking directly at me. Pale, motionless, taller than any child, but not quite fully grown. Its head tilted slightly, as though it was studying me. I slammed the gas, tires spinning on the gravel, and peeled back onto the highway, heart hammering in my chest. For the next 30 minutes, I drove as fast as I dared, eyes constantly scanning the sides of the road. I thought I saw more figures, sometimes one, sometimes several, standing at the edge of the trees, just watching. Each time I blinked, they vanished. The fog thickened again, pressing in, muffling the sound of the engine, until I could barely hear anything besides my own ragged breathing. Around 3:45 a.m., I reached a small town with streetlights. The world seemed normal again. The fog lifted, and the forest looked like nothing but trees. I slowed, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the rest stop, the handprints, the footprints, the whisper. But then, as I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw a figure in the middle of the road behind me, pale, hunched, motionless. I swerved into the next gas station parking lot, heart pounding, lights on full. By the time I looked back, it was gone. I called my dispatcher and asked if anyone had reported a rest stop there. She laughed lightly. "There's nothing on that stretch for miles," she said. "You sure you didn't miss an exit or something?" I didn't tell her about the whispers or the figures. I didn't want anyone thinking I'd lost my mind. Weeks later, I checked the area during the day. I drove the same route slowly, scanning both sides of the highway. There was nothing, just a straight stretch of asphalt bordered by forest. No rest stop, no footprints, no sign anyone had ever been there. But late at night, when the fog rolls in, I swear I can see the yellow light flickering faintly through the trees. Just ahead, just out of reach sometimes. When I'm driving alone, I hear the whisper again, soft, almost pleading, "Don't leave." And every time, my heart still jumps into my throat. I haven't gone back to that highway at night since. I still don't know what I saw or heard, or if it was real. All I know is that the highway, the hollow, and that rest stop, whatever it was, still exists somewhere, just waiting for the next driver to slow down. The highway that disappeared. I've been driving freight trucks for about 8 years now, mostly on night shifts through the Appalachian backroads. Usually, it's a quiet, predictable job, with the hum of the engine and the occasional distant headlights breaking up the monotony. But one night in early October, something happened that I still can't explain. I was hauling a refrigerated load from Roanoke to Charleston, West Virginia, taking Route 219 through a stretch of the mountains. I've driven dozens of times. It was 2:17 a.m. when I passed a small town, just as the streetlights flickered out, leaving the road illuminated only by my headlights. The air was damp and cool, carrying the faint scent of wet leaves and pine. The fog was rolling in thicker than usual, curling along the sides of the highway and making everything look unreal. The trees on either side seemed taller and darker than usual, and for a fleeting second, I had the sensation that I was being watched. I shook it off, as fatigue late-night hauls tend to do that to you, and kept driving. About 20 miles in, the road started to curve sharply, winding between hills and valleys that I knew well. That's when I noticed it. The guardrails were gone. Not missing in sections, but entirely absent. The familiar bends of the highway seemed to stretch unnaturally, like the road itself was different from memory. My stomach dropped. I glanced at the GPS. It showed the highway continuing straight, but my headlights illuminated nothing but dense trees and fog ahead. I double-checked the map on my phone. Route 219 was supposed to be here, but there was no road. I slowed to 30 miles per hour, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. My engine's hum seemed louder than normal, almost deafening in the unnatural silence. The fog thickened to the point where I could barely see the edges of the tires on the asphalt. Then I heard it, a faint tapping noise, like someone was running a stick against the metal of my trailer. I froze, heart hammering, scanning the mirrors. Nothing. No vehicles. No signs of life, just fog. I turned on the CB radio, hoping another trucker might respond. "Anyone out there?" "Route 219, near Black Mountain Hollow." Only static answered. Then, over the static, I heard something whisper, "Turn back." The voice was thin, rasping, almost human, but warped, as if it were underwater. I slammed the microphone down, my hands shaking. I told myself it was exhaustion, my mind playing tricks. I tried to retrace my route, but every turn I made seemed to put me deeper into the fog. The trees closed in around the road, branches scraping against the side of the truck like fingernails. My headlights caught movement at the edge of the fog, figures, maybe 2 or 3, standing perfectly still, staring at me. They didn't move as I slowed, didn't react as I honked. Then, as I blinked, they vanished. No sound of running feet, no rustling leaves, nothing. Around 3:02 a.m., I saw lights in the distance yellow, like a gas station or perhaps a rest stop. Relief surged through me. I accelerated, hoping to escape this creeping dread. But as I approached, the lights flickered and vanished. I drove straight toward them, and the road ahead dissolved into dense trees and thick fog. I slammed on the brakes. My truck skidded to a halt. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, each beat loud enough to drown out everything else. Panic set in. I grabbed my phone, tried to call my dispatcher, but there was no signal. Every hill, every turn seemed identical. It was as if the highway had stretched into a loop, endless and inescapable. The fog swirled unnaturally around the truck, and I felt like something was pressing against the cab windows, breathing, waiting. My headlights caught glimpses of figures again, tall, thin, motionless, just beyond reach. Their heads tilted in the same unnatural way. I drove slowly, inching forward, trying to stay calm. But the fog seemed to respond to me, thickening every time I looked away. Then I noticed scratches along the metal of the trailer, small but deep, as if something had been clawing at it while I was frozen in place. The hair on my arms stood on end, and I couldn't stop trembling. I turned on every light, honking repeatedly, hoping the noise would scare off whatever was out there. Nothing. Silence. Thick and heavy, settled back over the mountains. Around 3:30 a.m., I thought I saw a road sign in the fog, a small reflective sign I recognized. Black Mountain Hollow, 5 miles. My stomach sank. I'd seen that sign dozens of times before, but it seemed wrong. The reflection of my headlights made it look warped, almost alive. As I passed, I caught movement in my mirrors. A figure was walking behind the truck, matching my speed, keeping pace effortlessly. Tall, pale, arms hanging too long. I slammed on the horn. No reaction. I blinked, and it was gone. I drove on in a blind panic, gripping the wheel, sweating despite the cold. The fog eventually began to thin, and around 4:10 a.m., I saw a familiar intersection. The road looked normal again. Guardrails, pavement markings, the faint glow of distant streetlights. My chest heaved with relief, but the unease didn't leave. My mirrors were empty, the headlights back to normal, nothing followed. I called my dispatcher immediately, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, I'm back on track," I said. She didn't ask questions, but I could tell she sensed my panic over the static. Weeks later, I spoke to a local trucker about that stretch. He gave me a warning I won't forget. "That part of Route 219 gets foggy at night," he said. "People lose the road. Sometimes for hours. They swear the highway just disappears. Some never come back." I felt my stomach twist. I hadn't lost the road, not completely. I'd felt the road itself vanish beneath my wheels. The fog pressing in, and something following me since that night. I avoid that stretch of 219 whenever possible. I never drive alone there after dark. And sometimes, when I'm on other Appalachian highways in thick fog, I swear I see the road ahead stretch impossibly, curves I know shouldn't exist. Shadows that seem to follow me in perfect time with my truck. I've learned one thing, no matter how experienced you are. Some nights the mountains don't just hide you, they reach for you. I still drive these routes because it's my job, but I never forget that night. And if you're ever alone on Route 219 past midnight, with the fog rolling in, don't slow down. Don't stop. Because sometimes the highway doesn't want you to leave. The truck that wasn't there. I've been a night shift freight driver for over 7 years, mostly hauling goods through the Appalachian backroads. Nights are long, quiet, and predictable, or at least that's what I thought. One night in late November, around 2:53 a.m., I had an experience that still haunts me. I was driving north on Route 33 through a stretch of West Virginia forest I know well. The moon was hidden by clouds, and fog had started creeping over the highway, thick and wet. The smell of damp leaves and pine hung in the air, sharp against the faint scent of diesel from my truck. I was hauling a refrigerated load of produce, keeping my speed moderate, listening to the low hum of the engine and the occasional scratchy country music station to fight fatigue. Around 3:10 a.m., I noticed headlights in my mirror. At first, I assumed it was another trucker, but as I glanced closer, I realized something was off. The lights didn't move like a normal vehicle. They stayed the same distance behind me, no matter how fast I accelerated or slowed. A cold pit formed in my stomach. I tried flashing my headlights and honking, but the vehicle didn't react. It just followed. I called over the CB, hoping another driver might be nearby. Anyone behind me? Route 33, near Greenbrier Hollow? Static answered, followed by a faint hiss that sounded almost like laughter. My pulse jumped. I shook my head, telling myself I was imagining a dot as the road curved sharply through a dense patch of forest. I noticed something else. The headlights weren't just behind me, they were closer. I couldn't see the vehicle's shape yet, just the pale glow. Then, for a split second, the fog cleared, and I saw it. A truck, old and rusty, headlights blazing, but with no driver. The cab was empty. No figure inside. My hands gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles whitening. My heart pounded in a deafening rhythm. I tried to pass it, swerving into the left lane. My own headlights reflected off the other truck's grill, but as I looked in my mirrors, it had vanished. The fog swirled unnaturally where it had been. I couldn't explain it. My chest ached, my skin prickled, and I was shaking so badly I almost couldn't steer. I slowed down, trying to rationalize. Maybe it was a hallucination from fatigue, or some weird reflection from the fog. But the unease didn't leave. The road ahead twisted into a valley, narrow and lined with dense trees. The fog thickened again, pressing in so that I could barely see the asphalt. Then I heard it, the unmistakable rumble of a diesel engine behind me, slow and deliberate. Not the kind you hear from a distance right behind me, echoing in the cab like it was inside my own skull. I tried the CB again. Anybody out there? Silence. The fog muffled all sound except the engine rumble behind me. I couldn't see anything in my mirrors. I slammed my foot down, trying to outpace it, but it matched my speed perfectly. Faster, slower, it stayed right there, just behind my trailer. Panic set in. I pulled off into a small gravel pullout, heart hammering, breathing fast, thinking maybe the vehicle would pass. The fog seemed thicker here, almost crawling along the ground like mist with intent. I glanced in the mirrors. Nothing. My stomach relaxed for just a moment, but then movement in the fog caught my eye. Out of the mist emerged a figure walking along the shoulder. Tall, thin, pale, hunched slightly. I could see it clearly in my headlights now. It didn't run. It didn't wave, just walked, slow and deliberate, directly toward my truck. I grabbed my CB, trying to reach my dispatcher, my voice shaking. I need help. Something's here. Someone's walking toward me. The static crackled, but no one responded. I was completely alone. My fingers trembled on the wheel dot. The figure reached the edge of my headlights and froze. It didn't blink, didn't move. I noticed the face or lack thereof. Hollow, shadowed, almost as if the light passed through it. And then, for the first time, I realized the truck behind me wasn't a truck. The diesel rumble, the headlights, it had been mimicking me, following me. I slammed the gas pedal down, tires skidding over the gravel, and tore back onto the highway, heart racing, adrenaline surging. The rest of the drive was surreal. Every time I glanced in my mirrors, the fog seemed to shift unnaturally, hiding the shape that followed. Sometimes I thought I saw the truck again, at a distance, matching my every move, before vanishing into the mist. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the wheel. I didn't stop, not even at the next exit. Not until the first rays of dawn lit up the mountains did I dare to glance back. Nothing. The road was empty, normal. The fog was gone, and the highway looked like it always had. Weeks later, I spoke to a local trucker about that stretch of Route 33. He told me stories about trucks that follow you home, headlights appearing out of nowhere, vehicles without drivers that vanish once you're close. Some say they're spirits of drivers who died on the mountain, still roaming the highways they loved. I don't know if I believe all that, but I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know that night, I was followed by something that wasn't supposed to exist. I still drive Route 33 on night shifts, but I never slow down, never stop, and never let my headlights fall behind. Because sometimes, if you hesitate, the truck that wasn't there catches up. The mile marker that moved. I've been driving freight trucks at night for almost a decade, mostly through the Appalachian Mountains. I know the roads well, the curves, the small towns, and the stretches of highway where you can drive for miles without seeing another vehicle. But one night in early December, around 2:36 a.m., I had an experience that still makes my stomach turn. I was hauling a refrigerated load from Roanoke to Charleston, West Virginia, on Route 219. The air was cold and damp. Fog creeping along the roadside and curling around the cab of my truck. I remember thinking that the fog was heavier than usual, almost sticky, pressing against my windows. My headlights cut through it like knives, illuminating the wet asphalt in front of me. I glanced at the clock, 2:36 a.m. exactly. I took a deep breath, trying to shake the creeping unease that had been building all night. About 20 miles in, I noticed a mile marker on the right side of the road, an ordinary white post with mile 82 painted on it. I'd driven this stretch countless times. I knew exactly where the markers were. But as I passed, something made my heart freeze. The marker seemed off. It flickered, almost like a shadow shifting across it. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. Still there. I kept driving, telling myself I was seeing things. 5 minutes later, I saw it again. Another mile marker, mile 82. My pulse quickened. I had just passed that one. My hands gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white. The fog had thickened, curling in long tendrils across the highway. The engine's hum seemed louder, more oppressive, echoing in my cab. Then I heard a faint tapping noise on the trailer's side. Soft at first, almost like fingernails drumming on metal. I tried the CB radio, hoping another driver was nearby. Anyone on Route 219, near mile 82? I need confirmation. Am I seeing things? Static answered, followed by a faint hiss that sounded like whispering. I slammed the mic down, heart pounding. I told myself to keep driving. There was no way I was stopping out here alone. As I continued, the markers kept repeating. Mile 82. Mile 82. My mind screamed that this was impossible. I knew the geography, the turns, the trees, the curves, and yet I was stuck in some kind of loop. My headlights caught movement in the fog, a figure standing just off the shoulder, pale, hunched, and completely still. I froze. The air grew colder, almost painfully so, and a heavy, unnatural silence descended. No wind, no rustling leaves, just the figure, and the distant hum of my engine. I tried to speed up, but the fog seemed to close in, pressing against the cab like a physical weight. Then the figure moved, or I swear it did. It was too fast to be human, gliding along the edge of the fog, keeping pace with my truck effortlessly. My heartbeat thundered in my chest. I slammed on the horn, headlights flashing frantically, but the figure didn't respond. It just stayed there, silent, watching, gliding along the roadside. I thought about pulling off the highway, finding the nearest rest area, but I couldn't see anything through the fog. The markers kept repeating, the same mile 82, flashing back at me like a cruel joke. I was trapped. My breathing grew rapid, sweat forming despite the cold. I glanced at the mirrors, nothing, but every instinct screamed that something was following me, just beyond sight. Then I heard a voice, whispering, soft and raspy, coming from all around me. "Don't stop. Don't turn back." I froze, gripping the wheel as my mind raced. The voice wasn't human, or at least not fully. It echoed off the trees, surrounding me. I pressed the accelerator, tires spinning slightly on the wet asphalt, fog swirling unnaturally around the truck. My headlights illuminated the edge of the road, and for a split second, I thought I saw dozens of figures, tall, thin, their heads tilted unnaturally, standing in the mist. I didn't dare stop. I didn't dare slow down. Mile 82 came up again. And then again. Each repetition felt like hours passing in seconds, the fog pressing closer, the figures in the mist stretching toward me, silent and patient. My hands shook uncontrollably on the wheel. I tried to focus on anything real, my breathing, the road, the hum of the engine, but the fog and the figures seemed to reach into my mind, twisting every thought with dread. Around 3:20 a.m. Just as suddenly as it began, the fog thinned. Trees returned to their normal positions. The road curved normally. The mile markers were correct again. Mile 85, mile 86. The strange oppressive weight lifted from the cab. My hands were trembling, sweat running down my back, heart pounding as though I had run miles. I slowed slightly, scanning the mirrors. Nothing followed. No figures, no mist, no repeated mile markers. The world looked normal again, calm, ordinary. I made it to the next rest area safely. But I couldn't shake the memory of the repeated mile marker, the whispering voice, or the pale figure gliding through the fog. Weeks later, I asked a local trucker about that stretch. He told me stories of fog traps, sections of Route 219 where drivers disappear, or see strange repeating signs, hear whispers, and sometimes never come back. He warned me not to drive there at night alone. I still drive Route 219, but I avoid that stretch whenever possible. And sometimes, even on other highways, I swear I see the same pale figures at the edge of the fog, moving silently, watching, waiting. And sometimes, mile markers appear in the distance that I know I've passed already. Every time my pulse races, my hands shake, and I drive faster, never slowing down. Because I learned the hard way, some roads don't want you to leave, and some mile markers don't stay where they belong. The fog that swallowed the highway. I've been driving freight trucks at night for nearly 9 years, mostly across the winding roads of the Appalachian Mountains. I thought I'd seen it all, long stretches of empty highway, sudden deer crossings, blinding fog, even near accidents with other trucks. But what happened to me on Route 250 in West Virginia last October is something I still can't explain. It was around 1:58 a.m. and I was hauling a refrigerated load from Charleston to Staunton, Virginia. The night was unusually silent. No wind, no rustling leaves, just the steady hum of the diesel engine and the occasional distant owl. The highway was empty, the forest closing in tight on both sides. The air smelled damp and metallic, like wet iron. I remember glancing at the dashboard clock, 1:58 a.m., exactly. The fog was rolling in faster than I'd ever seen it, thick and soupy, sticking to the cab and dimming my headlights. I'd driven this stretch dozens of times, but that night, the road felt different. The curves seemed sharper, the forest darker, and the fog heavier, almost alive. Around 2:15 a.m., I noticed headlights in the distance, another truck, or maybe a car. Relief washed over me. But as I drove closer, the vehicle disappeared. Just gone. My pulse quickened. The fog was so thick now that even the edge of my tires was barely visible. Then, I saw it, a figure standing in the middle of the highway. Pale, thin, hunched slightly, facing me. I slammed on the brakes, skidding slightly on the wet asphalt. My heart pounded, chest tight. I honked frantically. The figure didn't move. I sat frozen for a moment, gripping the wheel. When I finally blinked and looked again, it was gone. No footprints, no evidence that anyone had been there. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe just a trick of the headlights in the fog. But then I noticed the fog itself seemed to move unnaturally, curling around the truck, wrapping tight, almost like fingers pressing against the cab. The air felt heavy, oppressive. Every instinct screamed at me to get out, but I was alone on a highway that stretched endlessly into blackness. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard it, footsteps on the gravel beside the cab. Slow, deliberate, matching my speed, as if someone or something was pacing me. I looked into the mirrors, nothing. Then came the whispering. A voice, raspy and urgent, carried through the fog. "Turn back. You don't belong here." I slammed my eyes shut for a moment, shaking my head. When I opened them, a shape appeared in the fog, a truck, old, rusted, headlights blazing, with no driver inside. It glided along the road behind me, keeping pace effortlessly. Panic set in. I floored the gas pedal, trying to outrun it, but it stayed right behind me, perfectly matching my speed. The fog swirled thicker now, pressing against the cab, muffling the sound of my engine. My hands shook on the wheel, eyes darting, trying to see any safe exit. Every turn seemed to lead deeper into the fog, as if the highway itself was bending, stretching. Trapping me. At 2:45 a.m., I noticed more figures. One at the roadside, another in the distance, just barely visible through the swirling mist. Pale, motionless, their heads tilted unnaturally. My pulse raced. My fingers cramped around the wheel. I tried to call for help on the CB radio, but static answered, broken by faint whispers that didn't sound human. I pressed the accelerator harder, gripping the wheel like my life depended on it, because it did. Then, the unimaginable happened. One of the figures stepped onto the road ahead, blocking the lane. I swerved, trying to avoid it, but the truck behind me stayed perfectly aligned, its headlights reflecting in the fog. The figure on the road didn't move, didn't even blink. I felt the icy grip of dread in my chest. The fog around me seemed alive, curling along the asphalt like smoke, wrapping tighter, constricting the space between me and the otherworldly shapes. I remembered a pullout coming up just ahead and aimed for it, swerving violently off the asphalt onto gravel. The truck behind me swerved too, perfectly, and for a moment, I felt trapped between two realities, the road I knew and the twisted fog-covered nightmare I was driving through. My breath came in ragged gasps. I slammed the horn, flashed every light, trying to scare whatever was behind me away. Nothing. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the soft whisper, "Don't stop." At 3:05 a.m., I finally broke free. The fog thinned, the forest returned to normal, and the road straightened out. My hands were shaking violently. Sweat ran down my back, mixing with the cold dew on the cab windows. I slowed slightly, glancing in the mirrors. The truck was gone. The figures had vanished. The road ahead looked ordinary again, mundane even, as if the last hour of terror had never happened. I reached the next town around 3:25 a.m. The first lights of street lamps bathing the highway in a reassuring glow. I stopped at a diner to calm down, ordering coffee and trying to convince myself I was imagining things. But when I looked at the rearview mirror, I saw a pale face in the mist outside, just for a split second, before it vanished. My hands froze on the mug. I couldn't explain it. Weeks later, I told another trucker about the experience. He nodded knowingly, recounting stories of that stretch of route 250. Fog that swallows vehicles. Strange figures appearing on the roadside. Trucks that follow you with no driver inside. He told me some drivers disappear, never to be found, and warned me to avoid that section at night. I haven't returned after dark since, even now. When I drive other Appalachian highways late at night and fog rolls in thick and heavy, I feel it, the oppressive silence, the unnatural swirl of mist, the eyes watching from the edges of the trees. And I always keep moving, because I've learned the hard way, once the fog swallows the highway, it doesn't let go. The man on the shoulder. I've been driving freight trucks on night shifts for nearly 10 years, mostly through the Appalachian backroads. The late-night runs are usually monotonous, engine hum, occasional wildlife, and long stretches of empty highway. But one night in late October changed the way I view these roads forever. It was around 2:12 a.m. I was hauling a refrigerated load from Roanoke to Charleston, West Virginia, on Route 219, a stretch I knew well. The air was damp and sharp with the scent of fallen leaves, and the fog was creeping along the forest edges. The trees were black silhouettes, leaning over the highway like looming sentinels. I was alone, lights cutting through the darkness, hands tight on the wheel, coffee warming my right hand. The road ahead seemed normal, too normal. In retrospect, around 2:25 a.m., I noticed movement on the shoulder ahead. At first I thought it was a deer, but the figure stood upright, completely still. Pale, thin, hunched slightly forward. My pulse spiked. I slowed slightly, squinting through the fog. The figure didn't move, didn't even blink. My chest tightened. What the hell? I muttered aloud. I tried to keep driving, convincing myself I was imagining things, tired from the night shift. But as I passed, I noticed something even more disturbing. The figure's head was tilted unnaturally, almost like it was studying me, evaluating me. The hair was dark long, hanging over a face I couldn't fully see. My stomach dropped. I glanced in the mirrors. The shoulder was empty behind me, no sign the figure had moved. I accelerated, trying to put distance between myself and that unnatural stillness, but the sensation of being watched didn't leave. Every mirror check, every flicker in the fog, kept my heart hammering. Then I heard it, a faint, deliberate footstep on the gravel. I turned my head sharply. The figure was no longer ahead, it was beside the truck, keeping pace effortlessly. My breath caught in my throat. "Hey, who's there?" My voice was shaky, cracking under the tension. No response. Only the crunch of gravel and the faint hiss of tires on wet asphalt. The figure stayed perfectly aligned with the cab, just beyond the headlight's reach, a shadow in the fog. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. I considered stopping, but every instinct screamed against it. Around 2:42 a.m., I tried to shake it off, weaving slightly, hoping the figure wouldn't follow the motion. But it mirrored me perfectly. My pulse surged, panic pressing against my chest. I tried honking and flashing headlights, nothing. The figure didn't react. Then, the whispering started, soft at first, almost like wind through the trees. "Turn back. You shouldn't be here." I froze. My blood ran cold. The forest seemed to close in around the highway. The fog thickened, curling along the cab like fingers. I could barely see the edges of the road. The sense of presence, the awareness of something watching me, moving in perfect synchrony, was unbearable. I thought about calling for help on the CB, but static met me every time. Then came a new sound, the scrape of fingernails along metal. I glanced at the trailer. Tiny scratches, wet and fresh, ran along the side, where my flashlight had caught them before. My stomach twisted. I slammed the gas pedal down. Tires squealed on the wet asphalt as I tried to outrun whatever it was. For the next 10 minutes I drove in a blind panic, Fog swirling around the cab, headlights slicing through thick mist, mirrors revealing nothing but shadow and fog. Every once in a while, I swore I saw movement at the edge of the trees, figures flitting just out of reach, pale, hunched, motionless. My heartbeat was deafening. At 3 a.m., I reached a familiar curve leading into a small valley. The fog thinned, the forest returned to normal, and I finally glimpsed streetlights in the distance. My chest heaved with relief, hands shaking violently. The figure, whatever it had been, was gone. My mirrors were empty. The trailer was untouched. The road looked normal. I stopped at a truck stop to regain my composure. The lights of the diner felt unreal, almost too warm. I ordered coffee, hands trembling, eyes scanning the parking lot. Nothing but the memory of that figure, moving alongside my truck in the fog, refusing to be seen fully, refusing to interact, burned into my mind. Weeks later, I asked a local trucker about that stretch of Route 219. He warned me, quietly, "Some nights, you see things out there. Figures on the shoulder, watching. They follow you, just enough to make you panic, just enough to make you remember." I nodded silently, not daring to ask too much. Since that night, I never drive alone on that stretch after midnight. Even during the day, I feel the weight of the memory, the way the fog seemed alive, the way the figure mirrored my every move. And sometimes, when I'm driving other Appalachian highways in fog, I swear I see it again, just a shadow at the edge of the trees. Pale, hunched, head tilted, watching me, following me. Silent, the scariest part. I don't know what it wants, and I'm not sure I want to find out. The radio that spoke back. I've been driving freight trucks on night shifts through the Appalachian backroads for nearly 10 years. Usually the nights are quiet, the hum of the engine, occasional wildlife, and long stretches of empty highway. But one night in early November, something happened on Route 33 that still makes my stomach tighten every time I think about it. It was around 1:50 a.m. I was hauling a refrigerated load from Roanoke to Charleston, West Virginia. The air was damp, smelling of wet leaves and pine, and a thick fog was rolling along the roadside, clinging to the cab windows. The highway was empty, and the engine's hum was the only sound I could hear. I glanced at my dashboard. Clock, 1:50 a.m. I took a sip of lukewarm coffee and tried to shake the feeling of unease that had been building all night. Around 2:05 a.m. I turned on the CB radio to check in with other truckers. I said, "Anyone on Route 33 near Greenbrier Hollow?" "Over." Static answered, followed by faint crackles, nothing else. I shrugged and kept driving. A few minutes later, the static returned, but this time, a voice answered, clear, low, raspy. "Don't stop." My heart jumped. I slammed my hand on the mic. "Who is this?" Only static replied. I shook my head, telling myself I was imagining it. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe the fog was playing tricks on me. But the voice had been deliberate. Around 2:15 a.m., I noticed movement in the fog at the edge of the road. A figure, pale and hunched, standing perfectly still among the trees. I froze, gripping the wheel. My headlights cut through the fog, but the figure didn't move. My pulse thundered in my chest. I glanced in the mirrors, nothing. I tried the CB again. "Anyone there?" "I see something on the side of the road over." The crackle of static answered, then a whisper, clear and urgent. "Turn back." I slammed the mic down, panicked. The air inside the cab felt thick, almost pressing against me. I checked the mirrors again. There was nothing except a shadow in the fog behind me. My stomach dropped. I could feel the presence, like eyes watching from the mist. At 2:25 a.m., the voice came again. Not through the CB this time. It came from the radio itself, the small stereo in the cab. Static at first, then whispering, "You shouldn't be here." Turn back. I dropped my coffee cup, spilling it across the console. My hands shook. I tried to turn the radio off. Nothing. It kept repeating, the whispers urgent, rasping, almost impatient. The fog thickened, curling around the truck like living smoke. I could barely see the asphalt beneath my tires. Then I noticed movement at the edge of the headlights, figures 2 or 3, standing just beyond reach. Pale, thin, motionless. My pulse raced. My hands gripped the wheel until it ached. I tried honking, flashing headlights, anything to break the presence. The whispering continued, now overlapping my CB in the radio. Don't stop. You're too close. Turn back. I slammed my foot on the gas, tires squealing on the wet asphalt. My mirrors revealed nothing, but I felt it, the presence of something following, keeping pace, just beyond sight. Around 2:40 a.m., the fog parted slightly, revealing a figure directly in my lane. Pale, hunched, its face shadowed. I swerved violently, barely missing it, tires crunching on the gravel shoulder. The figure didn't move. It was almost as if it wasn't fully there. My breathing came in ragged gasps. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest. I pressed the accelerator hard, trying to escape the stretch of highway. The whispers continued, insistent, never-ending. I didn't look back for fear of seeing it too clearly. Then I realized something worse. The radio and CB had gone silent. The whispers had stopped. For a brief moment, there was only the hum of my engine and the crunch of tires on wet asphalt. That silence felt heavier than the noise. At 3:05 a.m., the fog thinned. The highway returned to normal, straight, familiar curves. The figures, the whispers, the shadow following me, everything vanished. My chest heaved, sweat dripping down my face, hands shaking violently. I slowed down slightly. Scanning the mirrors, nothing, just empty road, trees on either side. Fog lifting like it had never been there. I stopped at a small gas station about 10 minutes later, hands trembling, voice cracking. I told the attendant I needed coffee. I didn't mention the voices or figures. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw something, just a fleeting glimpse, a pale shadow standing at the edge of the parking lot, watching. Then it was gone. Weeks later, I spoke to a local trucker about that section of Route 33. He told me stories about strange radios and CB, transmissions at night, voices that aren't human. Warnings, whispers that follow drivers through stretches of fog. Some drivers never make it through. Others, like me, escape but are left with the memory, the paranoia, and the knowledge that the mountain roads are alive in ways we cannot understand. Since that night, I never drive that stretch alone after midnight. I avoid the CB and radio at night unless absolutely necessary. And sometimes, when I'm driving on other Appalachian highways and fog rolls in thick and heavy, I swear I hear the whispers again, faint but insistent, urging me to turn back, to never stop, and reminding me that the highways aren't empty, they're watching. The headlights that followed. I've been a night shift freight driver for over 10 years, mostly navigating the winding Appalachian highways. Usually, it's monotonous. The engine hum, occasional deer, long stretches of empty road. But one night in late November changed the way I see those roads forever. It was around 2:10 a.m. I was hauling a refrigerated load from Roanoke to Charleston, West Virginia, on Route 219. The air was damp, carrying the earthy scent of wet leaves and pine, with fog creeping along the roadside. The headlights of my truck cut through the mist, illuminating the slick asphalt. I checked my mirrors, out of habit empty. Just the road stretching ahead, endless and quiet. Around 2:25 a.m., I noticed a pair of headlights far behind me. Not unusual, another driver perhaps, but something about them felt wrong. They didn't blink or sway with the curves of the road. They simply stayed the same distance behind me, steady and unwavering. My pulse quickened. I sped up slightly, testing it, but they stayed right there, perfectly matching my acceleration. I tried the CB radio. Anyone en route 219? Near Sugar Hollow? Static answered. I repeated myself louder. Still nothing. The headlights didn't move. Panic started crawling up my spine. I thought maybe it was another trucker playing the game, but even from the distance, I could see the glow of the lights wasn't right, too bright. Too steady, almost too close. By 2:37 a.m. The fog thickened, curling along the road like smoke, sticking to the cab, muting the world around me. I could barely see the edges of the asphalt. I glanced at the mirrors again. The headlights had moved closer. Way too close. I slammed my hands on the wheel, heart hammering, and accelerated. My stomach churned with fear, adrenaline flooding my veins. Around 2:45 a.m., I noticed something truly terrifying. The headlights weren't attached to a truck. I could see them perfectly now, reflected on the wet asphalt, and there was no cab, no shape, no figure inside. Just lights. Two perfect orbs following me, mimicking every movement, every turn, staying exactly aligned with my trailer. I felt my chest tighten, sweat running down my neck. Who's there? I shouted aloud, voice cracking. My own words sounded hollow in the foggy night. No response. Only the soft, steady hum of the engine and the whisper of tires on wet asphalt. The headlights followed, unrelenting, and I could swear they were anticipating my moves. I swerved slightly, trying to shake them off. They swerved in perfect unison. My pulse raced. Panic clawed at me. At 2:52 a.m., I saw movement in the fog figures, pale and thin, standing at the roadside, watching, heads tilted unnaturally. They didn't move as I passed, but every time I glanced in the mirrors, the light stayed with me, steady, unblinking. My hands cramped on the wheel, sweat pouring down my face. My mind screamed at me to get out, to stop, but every instinct told me to keep moving. I pressed the accelerator harder. The highway curved through dense forest, every bend familiar, yet somehow distorted, stretched unnaturally by the fog. My headlights reflected off wet leaves and asphalt, but the other lights stayed perfectly behind me. Occasionally, I thought I saw shapes moving inside them, shadows, but when I blinked, they were gone. Around 3:05 a.m., I reached a small pullout. I considered stopping, catching my breath, but every instinct screamed against it. I glanced at the mirrors one last time. The lights hovered there, just at the edge of vision, waiting. I floored it again, back onto the highway. The fog began to thin gradually, and by 3:20 a.m., the road returned to normal. Trees, asphalt, guardrails, all familiar. The headlights were gone. Nothing followed. I pulled into the next town, still shaking, hands trembling violently on the wheel. I parked at a diner, trying to calm down. The lights of the building were warm, almost unreal. I ordered coffee, trying to shake the memory of the unblinking lights following me, anticipating every move, perfectly aligned with my trailer. I tried to convince myself it was fatigue or a trick of the fog. But I knew it was something else, something I couldn't explain. Weeks later, I spoke to a local trucker about that stretch of Route 219. He nodded knowingly, recounting stories of headlights following vehicles with no driver, perfectly synchronized with their movements. He warned me, they don't just follow. They study. They wait. Some people vanish out there. I swallowed hard, not daring to ask more. Since that night, I never drive that stretch alone after midnight. Every time fog rolls in thick and heavy, I tense up, scanning mirrors, watching the edges of the road for lights. And sometimes, even on different highways, I swear I see the same steady, unblinking headlights in my mirrors, following, waiting, silently observing. The thought alone keeps me driving faster, never slowing down. Because I learned that night, On the Appalachian highways, some lights don't just shine, they hunt. The vanishing rest stop. I've been driving freight trucks through the Appalachian backroads for over a decade. Night shifts are usually quiet, predictable, even boring. The hum of the engine, the occasional deer, and long stretches of empty road. But one night in early December changed everything I thought. I knew about those roads. It was around 2:17 a.m. I was hauling a refrigerated load from Roanoke to Charleston, West Virginia, on Route 33. The air was damp and cold, smelling of wet leaves and pine. Fog had begun rolling in along the roadside, thick and clinging to the cab windows. The forest pressed close on either side, black silhouettes against the faint glow of my headlights. I had been driving for hours, eyes tired but alert, hands gripping the wheel. The road ahead seemed endless. Around 2:30 a.m., I noticed a rest stop up ahead. Normally, I'd skip it. I knew I could make it to the next town, but exhaustion was creeping in. My eyes burned, and the hum of the diesel engine was starting to lull me dangerously close to sleep. I decided to pull in. Relief washed over me as I slowed, my tires crunching on the gravel of the parking area. The rest stop looked wrong, not abandoned, at least not entirely, but off. The fluorescent lights flickered unevenly, casting sharp shadows on the concrete. A single diner sign hummed weakly, the paint peeling. There were no cars, no trucks, just the faint smell of oil and old cigarette smoke. I shrugged it off. I was tired. Probably imagining things. I parked, cut the engine, and stepped out. The night air was cold and damp, fog curling around my boots. I tried to shake off the unease, walking toward the diner door. The bell over the entrance didn't ring. Inside, the diner was empty. Tables were set, condiments neatly arranged, but no staff, no customers. A faint smell of fried food lingered in the air, stale and unpleasant. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice echoed unnaturally. No reply. I tried the bathrooms. The doors opened normally, but the stalls were oddly dark, as if no light reached the far corners. I felt a chill run down my spine. I told myself it was just fatigue, just the fog outside playing tricks. But the hairs on the back of my neck were standing up. Around 2:48 a.m., I returned to my truck, determined to leave. But as I got back on the highway, my blood ran cold. The rest stop had vanished. The gravel lot, the diner, even the flickering lights gone. In their place was just empty road, black forest on either side. I slammed my brakes, skidding slightly, eyes darting to the roadside. Nothing, just the familiar asphalt, stretching endlessly. I thought it was a hallucination, maybe fatigue. But then I noticed something else. My GPS showed the road as it always had, but there was no exit, no rest stop. Every mile marker confirmed it. It had never been there. My hands shook on the wheel, sweat running down my back, heart pounding. I tried calling over the CB radio. "Anyone near mile 87? Did you see a rest stop?" Static, nothing else. My pulse raced. I sped up, trying to get to the next known town, but the fog thickened, curling around the cab like smoke. My headlights barely cut through it. I kept scanning the sides of the road, half expecting the diner to reappear. But it didn't. Around 3:05 a.m., I saw movement in the fog. A figure, pale and thin, standing where the rest stop should have been. It didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. My hands froze on the wheel. The forest seemed to close in, pressing against the asphalt, muffling the sound of my engine. I pressed the accelerator harder, trying to leave the figure behind. It didn't chase me. It didn't move at all, but the presence was suffocating. Oppressive. By 3:20 a.m., the fog thinned slightly, the forest returned to normal, and the highway straightened. My chest heaved, hands trembling violently on the wheel. I glanced in the mirrors, nothing. The figure, the rest stop, the oppressive presence, all gone. The road looked as if nothing had happened. I reached the next town, parked at a 24-hour diner, and tried to calm down. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the figure reappear, but there was nothing. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been observing me, testing me, or perhaps punishing me for stopping. Weeks later, I spoke to a local trucker about that stretch of Route 33. He told me stories about a vanishing rest stop, a diner that sometimes appears to exhausted drivers on long night shifts. People pull in, think they're safe, and sometimes never leave. He warned me never to stop there alone at night. I didn't ask more. I didn't need to dot since that night. I never stop on Route 33 after midnight, no matter how tired I am. And even now, when I drive other Appalachian highways late at night, sometimes I see the faint glow of a diner in the fog, empty parking lot, flickering lights. And I keep driving. Always driving. Because I learned that some rest stops aren't meant to be visited. Some roads, they trap you if you let them. The highway that never ends. I've been driving freight trucks at night for over a decade. I know the Appalachian highways like the back of my hand, the curves, the valleys, the stretches of forest that press in so tightly you feel like the road is swallowed by darkness. I thought I'd seen it all. Wildlife crossings, fog that chokes your headlights, other trucks disappearing into black curves. But nothing prepared me for what happened on Route 219 that November night. It was around 2:05 a.m. I was hauling a refrigerated load from Roanoke to Charleston, West Virginia. The night was unnaturally still, the air damp, smelling of wet leaves and pine. Fog had started rolling in along the roadside, thick, curling along the asphalt like liquid smoke. My headlights pierced the mist just enough to see the road ahead. I checked my mirrors, empty, as usual. I thought the long drive would be boring. I was wrong. Around 2:20 a.m., I noticed a vehicle in my rearview mirror, a truck, old and rusty, headlights blazing, tailing me at a steady distance. I assumed it was a trucker running late. But something felt wrong. I increased my speed slightly. The truck mirrored me exactly. I slowed, it mirrored me again. My heart rate spiked. Something about the lights, the shape of the truck. It felt wrong. No driver inside. The fog thickened, clinging to the cab windows. I could barely see the asphalt. The forest pressed close, shadows stretching across the road. I tried the CB radio. Anyone behind me? Route 219, near Greenbrier Hollow? Static, no reply. I glanced in the mirrors again. The truck stayed perfectly aligned, following me. Not speeding, not slowing, just following. Around 2:35 a.m., I noticed figures on the roadside, pale, thin, hunched. One here, another there, all standing perfectly still, facing me. The fog curled around them, hiding their lower halves. My pulse pounded in my ears. I slammed on the horn. Flashing lights, nothing, they didn't move. And behind me, the truck's headlights stayed fixed, unwavering, like eyes watching. I floored it. Tires squealed on the wet asphalt. My heart raced so hard, I thought it would explode. Every instinct screamed to escape. The figures at the roadside seemed to follow, always at the edge of the fog, just beyond full view. I tried to shake them off, weaving slightly. The truck mirrored me perfectly. Around 2:50 a.m., my headlights caught movement further ahead. The road curved into a valley I knew well. There was a misty glow ahead, lights that weren't streetlights. A building? A rest stop? I prayed for it, desperate for human presence. As I got closer, I realized it was just a mirage, fog and light twisting together. There was nothing. The road stretched endlessly, and the forest pressed closer, suffocating. The truck behind me stayed. No driver, just lights, perfectly aligned. And then I heard it, whispering, carried on the cold wind that somehow penetrated the cab. "You can't leave. You don't belong." My skin crawled. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles cracked, my chest tight with panic. I tried the CB again. Static, then the faint echo of the whispering. Around 3:05 a.m., the fog thickened to the point that I could barely see the edges of the road. Every turn, every mile marker, seemed wrong-stretched, distorted. The forest pressed into the asphalt. The truck stayed behind me, unwavering. I realized I was trapped. There was no exit, no escape. The highway had become a loop, twisting unnaturally, curling into darkness that felt alive. I screamed aloud, "Leave me alone! Go away!" My voice was swallowed by the fog. The truck stayed. The roadside figures remained, pale, hunched, unmoving but watching. I was shaking violently. My hands ached from gripping the wheel. Every instinct screamed to stop, to escape, to find safety, but there was none. Around 3:20 a.m., the fog began to thin. I thought maybe I had escaped. Maybe this stretch was returning to normal. The forest straightened. The road returned to familiar curves. I glanced in the mirrors, nothing. No figures, no truck. Relief flooded me, but it was brief. As I exhaled, I realized something terrifying. The road ahead never seemed to end. Every mile marker repeated. Every curve led to the same valley, the same stretch of road. I stopped at a known rest area, shaking, hands trembling. The lights of the building seemed unreal, flickering in the prey-dawn mist. I poured coffee, trying to steady my breathing. I glanced in the rearview mirror. A figure, pale, thin, hunched, stood at the edge of the fog, watching. Then, in a blink, it vanished. Weeks later, I spoke to a local trucker about Route 219. He nodded, recounting stories of eternal highways, stretches where drivers vanish. See figures, encounter trucks with no drivers, or endless roads that trap you. He warned me never to travel alone at night. I nodded silently. I didn't need further explanation. Since that night, I avoid Route 219 after dark. I stick to well-lit highways, towns, and exits I know. But sometimes, in fog, when I glance in the mirrors, I swear I see lights behind me. Headlights perfectly aligned, figures on the roadside watching, waiting. And I know, deep down, that some stretches of highway don't let you go. Sometimes I dream I'm back on that road, fog curling around the cab, the unblinking lights behind me, the whispers in my ears. And every time I wake up with my heart pounding, hands gripping the sheets, realizing I'm still alive. But they're still out there, waiting, somewhere on the Appalachian backroads, on the highway that never ends.